delighted to be joined by Kate Shields, who is a former Chief Executive of Royal Cornwall Hospitals Trust and Cornwall and Isles of Scilly ICB. She started her career as a registered nurse and is a strong advocate for neighbourhood health. Kate will share her experience of addressing the real challenges behind maternity safety and improving care. We're also very lucky that she will be joined at the end by Kim O'Keefe, who's Chief Nursing Officer and Deputy CEO Cornwall, and the executive sponsor for improvement work there. And she's also a midwife by training. So we really appreciate her interrupting actually a break as she joins us from South Africa. So over to you, Kate.
Thank you, Naeem. As Naeem says, I'm Kate Shields, former Chief Exec of Cornwall Hospitals Acute Trust and the ex-Chief Exec of Cornwall and Isles of Scilly ICB. Have the next slide, please, Cole. So our challenge started in 2017 when we were inspected by the CQC and the whole hospital was found to be wanting. A Section 29A warning notice was put in place because it was felt that we had systemic harm across the whole trust, believed that the trust is failing to meet its legal requirements and standards, and they're related to issues like consent, duty of candour, and a number of services, 9 in total, were deemed to be inadequate, of which one was maternity. I came into Royal Cornwall Hospitals at that point as part of the special measures team, and between September 2017 and January 2018 we did an awful lot of work around with each service looking at what was driving the deficits in the service, what staff could do to work together. There was lots of audits, there was lots of structure, and it was heavily performance managed. The CQC came back in January 2018, and whilst quite a lot of the hospital had improved, so consent was better, duty of candour was improving, and complaints was improving, maternity wasn't. And when the inspectors got down into our maternity service, they found that women and their families still weren't involved in their care in any meaningful way. But worse than that, we'd actually made up some of the audits that we had presented back as our improvement. So with maternity early warning scores, midwives had filled them in retrospectively. With evidence-based policies, we'd written them, but we'd not shared them, and nobody was practicing to them. And we'd misreported safety checks for things like resuscitation equipment in our second theatre. And all of that was brought together under the label of false assurance that then led the trust into a second Section 29A warning notice. So at that point, we as a leadership team took a big step back. Second slide, please. Clearly what we'd been doing wasn't working. So we started talking to our staff, all of our staff, but our midwives in particular, about what outstanding meant, and nobody could describe it apart from a category as part of a CQC review. So we asked them to tell us what great care looked like, and they came up with the title of brilliant. I wanted fab, but that had already been taken by somebody else. So we started our journey to being brilliant, and what that meant for us, for our families, for the people we love who we cared for. We're a very local hospital. We also looked into our leadership team that was leading the maternity service. Great people, but what they had seemed to do was to put a layer on top of maternity where nothing could get out and very little got in. So we removed the whole leadership team, the midwife, the general manager and the CD for obs and gynecology. And almost immediately we had a bubbling of issues that came out through freedom to speak up, or from people coming and knocking on somebody's door to tell them what they thought the particular issues were. We had NHS Improvement with us at the time, and we used that as a lever to be able to bring in support for the work we wanted to do, but also to look at how we started reporting our outcomes in a way that made sense for our organisation. We listened a lot around glass ceilings and specialist roles, and we started to grow our own specialists within the service. And as we were doing that, we also paid special attention to the score survey, so people could start telling us what the culture was like where they were working, and in some cases it made really poor reading. And we engaged strongly around local transformation on better births, which then drove our evidence-based policies, but it wasn't driven by the board or by the executive, it was driven from within the service. And one of the key changes that we made was two very angry women came to my office with Kim, who you'll meet later, to tell me how poor our service was, not just for women having babies with us, but also midwives working there. And it was at that day that our Maternity Voices partnership was invented. And they've been with us continuously all through the changes over the last 8 years. One of the things that was sentinel was Guy's and St Thomas's had invented an Improve Well app. We adopted the Improve Well app, and within 6 months we had more people registered in our hospital of 450,000 people than the whole of Guy's and St Thomas's, and over 50% of those people registered were midwives changing their services. That started to bring about a systemic improvement at the breadth and depth of which we hadn't realised what we were doing. Next slide, please. So our learning, be decisive and set clear expectations. So in Cornwall, we look after people we love. We treat our neighbours, our relatives, our colleagues. So being clear around what's good enough for the people that we serve was very important in setting the baselines that we as an organisation adopted for the care we wanted to deliver. We learned that strategic engagement has to be wide and deep. It can't be with heads of service. It needs to be with our domestics who are working on wards and know way more about what's happening in our services than we know ourselves. We learned to be hard on issues, not on people. So even the removing of the leadership team, we did it in as kind and compassionate a way as possible, being clear about why it was happening, but not blaming them for failing to deliver. We took an approach that if what we're doing isn't working, we'll take a step back and rethink it. We won't plough on doing something that isn't getting the results that we want. We'll try and work out why. We focus on culture and positive engagement, open doors and minds. So our midwives felt they'd told us a lot over many years. It's just we hadn't been able to listen. So being willing to think the unthinkable and then to take responsibility for acting on it became something that the whole of the exec team was accountable for. And I suppose we did underestimate the power of the board oversight, sharing stories, good ones, not so good ones, sharing successes, sharing problems within the context of the board was really powerful in giving maternity the stage that it needed in order to improve. And for us, and maybe not for everybody else, we had a big issue around minding the gap. And that is the space between governance within a service and governance at the board. The gap in the middle can become very wide. And we paid special attention to make sure we closed it as far as we could. Next slide, please. We also did some work around whose shoes. So it's really easy to say my view of this is X. So this was just an advert for women who'd had babies, their families, midwives, obstetricians, people who worked in the services, to come together and to talk about how it feels to do somebody else's job, so have to have somebody else's role. And that started a whole conversation that we didn't think would be as powerful as it was, but it really started us to question fundamentally the way in which we work together as a team. Next slide, please. This graphic, I love it, you can't see it, but we did loads of these. The first ones we did were really hard to read because they had really difficult words on it about how people felt around working in our services. This is one around continuity of care, and it's talking about our hopes, dreams and aspirations for doing it. But it set a compact and a context through which improvement could work. The latter ones I love because they've got lovely words on them about teams working together, feeling supported, but bringing them side by side, it shows a journey from where we were to where we got to, and it has been sustained. Next slide, please. So our outcome, by 2019, the CQC rated maternity services as good, which was a significant transformation in just under 2 years. The CQC commented on the significant embedded cultural change, and Kim and I were asked to go and explain how we'd made it happen to a CQC meeting in London. And all we can share is what we're sharing today. The rating was maintained in 2023 during the National Maternity Inspection, when other services were struggling post-COVID and were being downgraded. And we have a waiting list for midwives. Now, the Kaiser Permanente will tell us that waiting list for midwives tells us more than anything else around our service. It's a place where people choose to come and work because it gives them the value that they want from the care that they wish to deliver. So crucially, this wasn't a result of a single intervention. It was the product of sustained evidence-based approach to engagement, leadership and collaboration. And it's continued for 8 years. So our learning for our outcome is there's no quick fixes. You can improve rapidly, but to sustain it, you need to retain all of the things that hold it in place over a long period of time. Next slide, please. So this is Christopher Robin, and I've nicked him from Kim. So Christopher Robin has a teddy bear called Edward, and Edward Bear's coming down the stairs now, bump, bump, bump on the back of his head, behind Christopher Robin. It is, as far as he knows, the only way of coming downstairs. But sometimes we feel that there really is another way, if only he could stop bumping for a moment and think of it. And our pause between CQC 2017 and CQC 2018 was when we stopped bumping our service on the head as we led it for improvement, and we allowed our service to regroup and think about what they needed to do to come down the stairs on their feet. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. That's a wonderful way to kind of close off with Crystal Robin. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Kate, you've been a very fascinating journey in terms of taking a service and introducing so many improvements, and clearly for staff and for leaders to go on that journey has been quite something. How do we, in terms of with all that change, how do we enable people to be psychologically able to deal with change while still able to carry on with their jobs, which is often the difficulty with all things going on around us? How do we create that focus?
So I think we talk a lot about psychological safety, but I think we don't actually describe what it is. So one of the things I didn't mention in the presentation was being a kind and compassionate leadership. Doesn't have to be soft. Kind and compassionate leadership can address really difficult issues, but without blaming individuals for their role in it. And I think we sometimes play lip service to psychological safety. It's something that avoids us addressing potentially the problem that's in front of us. Whereas if it's twinned with kind and compassionate leadership, it allows people to voice the difficulties they've got with the issues they're facing and not to feel fundamentally blamed or undermined around doing so. I just think it's essential if we are going to address really tricky systemic issues that are no one person or one profession's responsibility.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. And it's great to kind of hear your story around the importance of culture, behavior, kindness in improving maternity services.